Today we will be giving you a demonstration on how to peel and cut a butternut squash for making butternut squash soup with apple and a bit of curry. This is our butternut squash soup. We do butternut squash soup with a variety of different flavor aromatics. This happens to be an extremely popular one. We've served it in a restaurant for many years. It's always gotten great kudos. So one of the things that you'll notice while we're demoing the butternut squash is how the shape is a little bit unruly. So you want to make sure that you have cut it so there are flat surfaces and they're not rolling around on the cutting board. That's much more dangerous than you might think, to have this hard skinned squash and not have a flat surface to use. Now take a look at this wide peeler. That's what you want, is a wide peeler so that you can peel the skin off. Go through. The skin isn't terribly thick, but it is not easy to cut with a knife. So using a peeler is your best bet. Once the squash has been completely peeled, you'll be able to much more easily cut it open and scoop out the seeds inside of the bulb part of the bottom of the squash. Okay, scooping them out with a spoon is very easy. Chances are you won't need to save them. Once the seeds have been removed, cut your squash into cubes using the flat side down. Cutting the squash into relatively uniform size cubes just makes them cook at about the same rate, so you will have squash that becomes soft and ready to puree. The soup is going to be a smooth puree, so you don't have to cut lovely chunks, but just fairly uniform chunks to put in your pot. Here's an easy way to tackle the rounded edges. Cut off a small sliver and make sure that you lay your squash down on the flat surface. This stops, again, this from rolling, and you have much better control when you're cutting through a hard squash like this. If your knife were to slip and the squash was rounded, it could be a disaster. Next, we'll cut one large onion. Again, no need to cut into anything other than relatively the same size chunk that you cut your squash into. We'll just be adding this to the pot. Everything will cook and flavors will blend all together as we're cooking the squash until it becomes soft enough to puree. Here's one helpful little hint for cleaning fresh ginger. Use the side of a teaspoon and just lightly peel down around the knobs. It actually works even better than a paring knife. You can get into the little nooks and crannies and get the skin off extremely easily. Since this recipe will be cooking the ginger along with the squash and the onions, it wouldn't be required, but the microplane grater is a fantastic kitchen gadget for grating ginger finely when you do need it to be raw and you want it to be nicely chopped. It also eliminates a lot of that stringiness that you sometimes get when you're trying to, right, looks great. Fresh ginger adds an amazing depth of flavor to the squash. It also adds a nice little bit of sort of sweet underlying heat. So that's one layer of flavor we'll be adding to the soup. The next thing we'll be adding are fresh apples. We happen to be in the Midwest, so we use local apples through the winter. And we're using a combination of apples. We like a little bit of tart in a Haralson apple. Then we add a little bit of a Honeycrisp apple to lend a little bit of sweetness. If apples are not widely available in your area, the best option for sort of the great cooking apple is, of course, the Granny Smith. If Braeburns are available in your area, that's also another good option. We'll be chopping the apple a similar size to the squash. Again, the apple, the squash, the onion will all cook together in a big pot of liquid. In this case, vegetarian stock and some apple cider. And we will be cooking those until everything is nice and soft and ready to just be turned into a amalgamation of smooth, silky butternut squash soup. I'm not sure there is a dish that doesn't really benefit from the use of a little bit of garlic, except maybe angel food cake. So I think we'll add a little bit of garlic to this soup. Peeling the cloves is fairly easily if you've given them a little bit of a knock with the flat side of your knife. And that will release the skin, and then it will peel instantaneously away from the clove. Now that we have all of our vegetables, aromatics, flavorings in the pot, we will add our vegetable stock just to cover. In fact, if you prefer, you can make your own vegetable stock. Use whatever vegetable trims you have had around for the last couple of days. Just cover it with a little bit of water, add a little bit of onion. You can even leave the onion peels on it. It actually gives it a great color and does add a lot of flavor. We'll also add a little bit of apple cider to the mix. Bring your pot filled with your cubed squash, your chopped apples, your onion to the stove over high heat. You'll want to bring this mixture to a boil. Notice that we just have the mixture just barely filled, covered with the liquid, some vegetable stock, a little bit of water, and apple cider. You could use chicken stock if you chose to do that. We just like to use vegetable stock whenever we're making a vegetable soup, so there's no question about its being acceptable for all vegetarian or non-meat eaters. When the mixture then does come to a boil, you want to turn your flame down to a simmer and allow your vegetables to get completely soft and ready to puree. To accompany this velvety, smooth butternut squash soup, it's always nice to have a contrasting texture, so we'll be making a date and apple relish. Now, fresh dates are really fun to use. They're really easy to pit. Just need to make a quick little slit right down the long side of the date, and the little seed that's located inside pops right out. Dates also are a really nice complement to the curry flavor in the soup, and between the tart Haralson and the little bit of sweet in the Honeycrisp apple, and then again this little bit of a chewy texture to the date, it makes a great relish. We'll just put a little bit on top. You can make this while your soup is cooking by chopping up the dates once they've been pitted. With your dates once nicely chopped and your apples into a fine dice, mix the two together in a bowl with some chopped scallions. We have a house vinaigrette that's really just a very simple kind of an agrodolce mixture. Agrodolce meaning sweet sour, so there is a little vinegar, a little sugar, a little oil. Very, very simple. But to that mixture, we will add also 2 tablespoons of what is called date syrup. Date syrup can be found in Mediterranean or European grocery stores, specialty stores. If you can't find date syrup, try pomegranate molasses. It's got a very nice sort of tart tang to it with a little bit of an aftertaste of sweet, and goes terrifically with the dates here. So you toss that mixture together, adding a little bit of the sweet and sour dressing until everything is all nicely mixed together. Although I really like kitchen implements and tools that are good for multiple usages, I absolutely love my immersion blender. This is what you need to puree your soup right in the pot in which you cook it without having to transfer it into a food processor or a blender and put on a lid that will explode anyway when the mixture is too hot. So go ahead and use your immersion blender. Now we have the finished product. Beautiful, smooth, fragrant. It's too bad this isn't smell-o-vision. It's delicious. Alright, now we'll top this with a dollop of, I love a dollop of a nice cool yogurt, or you could use a little sour cream, but I love the Greek yogurt because it's got a nice little tang to it. Little dollop of Greek yogurt right in the center, and then a spoonful of the crunchy, kind of sweet, tart date relish. Makes it just a beautiful dish. Serve that with a crusty loaf of hot bread, and you have an excellent autumnal dinner. Bon appetit!